Good morning, everybody. This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and I will be glad in it. Thanks for joining us once again. I just appreciate all our viewers and those that support our channel. It's a little wet and rainy out here, so I'm going to step inside and just hang on 1 minute. We'll talk about the storms of life. I'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again. You know, Jan and I were out on the terrace the other night, right behind me here. And as we were visiting, it was kind of late in the evening. The sun was starting to go down. And these clouds rose up. Beautiful clouds, big storm clouds coming. And, well, rather than me try to describe it to you, just watch this. So, what did you think of that storm? It was interesting. It was both beautiful and scary at the same time. To watch it from a distance and to see it where we saw it, it was very beautiful. But if you were in the middle of that storm, I would say that could be quite frightening. So afterwards, when I was viewing the video of the storm and the footage, and the Lord was just reminding me about the storms of life and what we go through on this earth, and that He is always there for us. So I want to share a couple things with you. One is a story about Jan and I, and I'm going to break this down just simply. This is my opinion. I see that there's basically three storms in life. One is the storms we create, or what I call self-afflicted storms. Things that we do, choices we make, and that we pay the consequences for it. And I've done plenty of that. So hopefully you learn from those lessons and you move on and you don't repeat those. Two is the storms of the natural world. We live in a world that's been affected by sin. It's broken, and it's feeling the effects of sin on this earth, and so we see all kinds of things in nature that are out of balance. And right now we're seeing these storms and things that are happening down in the south, and flooding. Other areas we see intense heat, and in the wintertime you see these extremes, and it gets extremely cold. So these are the forces of nature that's gone awry because of the sin that's on the earth. The third kind of storm is the storm that the enemy throws on us as we go about doing God's will and we are persecuted. And Jesus said in Matthew, I believe, "In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I have overcome the world." So as we go through life and we encounter the various storms of life, the one thing we can count on is that God will always rescue us if we cry out to Him. Now, I'm going to tell a story about a time when Jan and I kind of went through a storm. This was not self-inflicted in that we made bad decisions, but this was a storm of persecution, I believe, and a storm that the enemy was trying to stop us. When Jan and I were living in Phoenix, Arizona, we had been there several years, and we were praying about, Lord, what do you want us to do? What's your plan for our life, and where do we go from here? So we began to feel stirred up, and many times when the Lord is moving you on to another place or another season in life, maybe he's got a change for you, he will stir you up inside, and you can begin to feel that stirring. So we started feeling that urging, and it was more Jan than myself. Back in those years, Jan was kind of leading spiritually, and I was dragging my feet along. It took me a while to mature as a young man, and we had only been married about 10 years at that point, but still learning lessons from the Lord as he showed us. And so Jan was praying, and we were agreeing together that God was going to show us our next step. And so we settled on and felt like the Lord was leading us to move to Colorado Springs. So at the time I was doing electrical work and didn't think much about it. We were just kind of open to, okay, Lord, whatever opportunities you bring along. So not too much longer, I would say a few months later, I happened to be reading the Sunday paper in Phoenix, the Republic, I think is the name of it. And I don't typically do this, but I'm curious sometimes, and I look in the classified ads, the want ads for jobs, just to see what jobs are out there in the area of Phoenix, because I was kind of curious, and we all look around sometimes. But I happened to spot an ad, a little ad in there that said, electrical work in Colorado. So I thought, well, I'm going to look at that and see, where that's at. That could be anywhere in Colorado. We had no idea. So I called on that ad the next day, and it turns out the job was right there in Colorado Springs, where we felt like we were supposed to be moving to. So I responded to that. I took the job. We had 2 weeks to move from Phoenix to Colorado Springs, and for me to be up there working. So it was a whirlwind, and we packed up and we moved, and we went up to Colorado Springs. So when we landed up there, we didn't know anybody up there. We had no connections other than one person, a friend of ours, Don Crow, that we had talked to over the phone, and he was part of Andrew Wommack Ministries. So Jan had spoken to him and asked for prayer as we went up there. We landed up there. It was a whirlwind, and I'll tell you what, for me, it was just an emotional roller coaster, because here I was packing up my family, moving up there. I mean, we were all feeling the stress. We had nowhere to land. We didn't have a home that we were renting or buying. This was all new territory to us, and so it was a step of faith. It was a giant leap of faith on my part and on Jan's part too. So we landed in Colorado Springs. We ended up in a hotel up there, and Jan began searching for houses. Now, about this time, it was the early 90s, about 92, something was going on in Colorado Springs, and it was like it had become the Mecca for Christian ministries. All of these ministries were converging on Colorado Springs at the same time, and this was right about when Focus on the Family left California and they moved to Colorado and relocated. And so hundreds, if not thousands, of people were relocating, other than just the normal people moving in and out. And there was a housing shortage. I mean, it was hard. Jan called and called and called, and we were looking for just a little house to rent. And we just could not find anything. Every time something popped up in the paper and in ads, it was gone by the time we contacted them. So I was getting worried, because I had limited funds and we couldn't stay in this hotel forever. We were sitting with a U-Haul full of all of our worldly goods packed in this U-Haul. We needed to land somewhere, and I needed to unload our stuff, and we needed to find our home. So Jan and I began to pray, and the Lord spoke to her and said, this home that we're going to find is not in the paper. It's not being advertised. And so Jan just kind of paused, and she's like, Lord, you're going to have to show us and connect us. And so she actually made a phone call, and I don't remember the details of how this came together, but she made a phone call and talked to a realtor. And it turns out this realtor also had rental homes. And so he mentioned that, yeah, I've got a home that's actually coming up for lease, because at the end of the month, like in about a week and a half, this family was going to move out. And so he was going to put it up for lease at that time. So we asked if we could go in and view it early. He agreed. We went in and we took it. And it was a great little home for us. But it was such a blessing, and it was just a relief to us. But the Lord led us. We just looked to Him and trusted Him. And He brought us through this time of transition, this time of change. And to me, it just felt like a storm. It was just roller coaster ride. I think a lot of you have gone through that, or you may be going through it right now. But I wanted to encourage you with a couple things, because as I was thinking about storms and studying, I wanted to read a couple of verses to you here. So one is in Psalms. If you go to Psalms 107, this is all about Israel and how God rescued them over and over and over again. And a lot of this, what's interesting, is these are things that they brought upon themselves because they were disobedient to the Lord, but the Lord still rescued them. He still had a plan. He still loved them. He loves you. He has a plan for you. And even if it's something, a storm, a chaos that we've created ourselves, God is faithful to rescue us from that. One of the verses here in 107:28 says, "And they cry to Jehovah in their trouble, and He brings them out of their troubles. He makes the storm a calm so that its waves are still." And I'm going to read that. That was in the modern King James Version. I'm going to read it in the Passion Version. It says, "Then we cried out, 'Lord, help us, rescue us,' and He did. God stilled the storm, calmed the waves, and He hushed the hurricane winds only to a whisper." I like that translation because it really kind of gives you a good picture of how the Lord rescued them, and how He just calms the storm, stills the storm. But you have to be patient and let the Lord work in these situations. So interesting in Psalms 107 how over and over again they were disobedient to the Lord. They cried out, and God always rescued them. And I was studying storms and thinking about this, and I've been reading through the New Testament too. And I'm reminded about when there's a couple of occurrences where the disciples are in a boat. And the first one is Jesus is in the boat and He's asleep, and they're going across this big lake, and the storm came up and the ship started to sink, and Jesus was asleep down inside the boat in the ship, and they came down and said, help us, we're drowning, we're going to sink." And so let me read this to you. This is out of Luke 8:24 and 25. "And they came to Him and awakened Him, saying, 'Master, Master, we are perishing.' Then being aroused or awakened, He rebuked the wind and the raging water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. Jesus spoke to it and rebuked it as a man, not as God, but as a man that having authority on this earth. And He said to them, 'Where's your faith?' And being afraid, they marveled, saying to one another, 'Who is this one? He commands even the winds and water, and they obey Him.'" And this was right after He fed the 5,000. And so they're seeing all these miracles, and they're just being astounded. Who is this? But Jesus says, "Where's your faith? You could do this." So if we look at another occurrence, and this is one that is, we've probably heard this, you've probably heard this many times, about when Peter walked on the water. Jesus was walking on the water, but not very often do people mention that Peter also walked on the water. So let me read this little passage to you. And so the backstory is Jesus had sent the disciples across the lake to go to the other side. This is kind of like a small ocean out here. And He went up to pray. And so He was up there praying for quite a while. And early in the morning, the Spirit showed him they were out on the lake and they were in this storm. So he came, and he came walking across the water towards them. So when they spotted him, when the disciples saw Jesus out on the water, first they thought it was a ghost, and they cried out and they were afraid. But Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, bid me, tell me to come to you, step out of the boat." And so he said, come on, step out here. So, and he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But seeing that the wind was strong, he was afraid. Peter was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, "Lord, save me, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "Little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they had come into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." What I want to point out to you is that we talk about Peter and how he doubted. He stepped out on the water, and then he began to get distracted, and he began to focus on the waves and the wind. And it says here in verse 30, but seeing that the wind was strong, he was afraid. So he took his trust off of Jesus, and he began to focus it on the storm and what was happening. And, oh, look at this, look at what's happening around me. Instead of knowing that we could trust in Jesus, that he could trust in Jesus. And it says, and beginning to sink. And I thought that was interesting, because it doesn't say that he just sank. Immediately he sank and went in the water. But it said beginning to sink. And I think, my opinion, I wasn't there, I didn't see it, but I think the process was, as he began to shift his belief, his focus, his trust from Jesus to the storms, that's as he began to sink gradually and recognize that. And I looked up that word beginning in the Greek, and it comes from a root word, archeo or archo. It's a primary verb to be first in political rank or power, meaning to rule or to reign over. And so I believe what happened was his doubt and his fear began to rule and reign over his faith that he had in his ability to walk on the water and trust Jesus for that. And I think this is what happens with us, is that we have trust in the Lord, we look to the Lord, we pray and ask the Lord for things. But the storms of life come up, and we begin to get distracted, we begin to get fearful, and we begin to place our trust more in what we see than what we're believing in the Lord. And the Lord's saying at one point, he spoke to someone in the Gospels, and he said, don't be afraid, only believe. I think we need to learn how to trust God. As we trust him and look to him, we can learn, we can understand that God is faithful. God is trustworthy. He's not putting these awful things on us. He's here to rescue us and bring us through life. He is here to give us that abundant life. You know, John 10:10, the enemy comes but to steal, kill, and destroy, storms of life. But I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I just wanted to encourage you today that God says, you cry out to me, you trust in me, and you can rise up and be above these storms. God will walk you through these storms. He'll take you under, over, around. He will rescue you. God is faithful to his word, and he will always rescue those that cry out to him. But we have to humble ourselves and recognize that I can't save myself. I can't do it myself. And if I look at the storm and I look at the problem in the situation and think that it's greater than what God can do, I'm going to begin to sink. I'm going to begin to pull my faith away from the Lord delivering me, and I'm going to begin to trust in the calamity, the problem. Oh, what am I going to do here? And the Lord says, no, don't do that. Put your eyes on me, because I am a God of unlimited resources, and I will rescue you. I will deliver you. But we have to trust the Lord. So I just want to pray for anybody that's going through a storm in life today. Lord, I bless all of those that are viewing, and I bless them with peace and calm in their lives, Lord, that whatever storm they're going through right now, Lord, you will bring them that peace and that grace to walk through that storm. And Lord, on the other side, just as these storms and the storms outside that we saw, they came and it looked really bad, and then they moved on and they passed. And these storms will pass. The Lord wants to bring you assurance and confidence that He's faithful and true to His word. And don't let these storms of life distract you or destroy you or dissuade you from His purpose, God's purpose and plan for your life. He has good things for you. So thank you for joining us, and I just bless you, and I am just thanking you, Lord, for helping these people that are going through these storms, that they will find the peace and calm in you. So just remember, don't let the bad news discourage you. Let the good news encourage you. All right, God bless you. See you all next time. Bye-bye.